Welcome to American Pulse. Our program today is about politics, election, being involved in the government, being involved in helping out the communities. I'm privileged and honored to have Senator Phil Boyle with me in the show tonight. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much for responding to us and accepting our invitation to come and talk to my viewers.
My pleasure.
Phil Boyle, a proven record of cutting taxes and creating jobs. Phil Boyle eliminated the job-killing MTA payroll tax for local businesses, and he delivered a $3 billion middle-class income tax cut and capped local property taxes. Phil Boyle, as your state senator, he'll cut taxes for small businesses and reduce job-killing regulations. No wonder so many Democrats, Republicans, and independents are supporting Phil Boyle for state senator.
Senator Boyle, give us a little bit of your background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up on Long Island, which is a suburb of New York City, and Long Island is it's a bedroom community. A lot of the people who live out there commute to the city for work, it's I say, as I like to say it, I grew up in the middle of the middle class. My family was not political. My father worked in the defense industry as working to build planes, and my mother was a nurse, a school nurse. And I have two older sisters, so we went to public schools, and I think the way that I got interested in politics was that we would sit at the dinner table when I was growing up and talk about current events. I remember when I was growing up, it was during the Vietnam War, and so every night we'd have a little debate at the dinner table. My oldest sister, was kind of like one of those, I wouldn't say hippie, but 60s rebellious children, and my father was a pretty stern, conservative, and so they would debate things like that. And I really got into learning about it and learning about our American history and our government, and that's when I decided that's what I wanted to do.
So how old were you when that happened, more or less? So
that was like middle school, probably. Like, but it was interesting because I thought about this years later. That I remember distinctly pretending I was sick and not going to school so I could stay home and watch the Watergate hearings, And I didn't think much about it. Then I thought, well, how many 12-year-olds were actually doing that? They might have been pretending they were sick, but they didn't do it to stay home and watch
Well, I think 12-year-olds, when they pretend they're sick, they're playing games on
Exactly right. Now they are, right. So I was always fascinated by American history and government because of those conversations, and so what I did was I started to volunteer on campaigns at an early age. So
the first thing you started to do is to volunteer in campaigns of other people running for offices.
That's right. And in America, that's often a way that someone gets involved with politics. If your family is not political, obviously there's instances where the father and the son and the daughter all run for office. We see with the Clintons and the Bushes, and other families, and the Kennedys, for example. But the average American who does not have a family involved, typically, if it's something you want to do, you would volunteer on a campaign. And first you have to figure out what you are. Are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? Whatever party you're interested in, then you work on one of those campaigns, whatever party you feel more comfortable with. Hopefully that person wins, and then you may intern in that office, like volunteer and do other things in the office, maybe get a job, and that's very a typical way of getting into politics here in this country.
Great to know. Egypt is going through a tough time now, and there is some sort of election for the Congress, next Congress, and it's believed to be one of the most crucial election.
Yeah.
Coming up. So if you can give us, if you can shed the light on the election process here in America, how does it happen, and what's the importance of people voting?
Yeah, voting in this country and in Egypt and every country is vitally important, and I think particularly for someone who's in public service now, when I see sometimes the low percentage of Americans who are actually voting in their elections, it's disheartening. And you see other countries, for example, and it was a while before since they had the vote, but South Africa, when Nelson Mandela first ran for president, there were literally people waiting online for 8 hours to vote. That's how strongly they felt about it. And the running of any country, particularly in Egypt in a difficult period of time, the turnout to go out to vote is vitally important. the way it works in the United States is that whatever party you belong to, you go and you interview for those parties. And again, the two big parties in the United States is Republican and Democrat. However, we have many other parties, smaller parties, the Green Party and other parties like that.
Yeah, we don't hear too much of them, I think, in the other parts of the world. We hear like a lot
in Republican and Democrat. But we in Europe, I think the Green Party is fairly large, and they get a certain percentage of the vote every time. They may not win, but they certainly get a certain percentage of the vote, which could actually make the difference on who gets elected. So when you go and screen, for example, I decided that I wanted to run in the Republican Party. I went to the Republican Party leaders and said, I'm interested in running for the state legislature. This is my background. I have a college degree in political science. I'm an attorney. I had gone to law school, and also had a master's degree in public administration. So it seemed like, at least educationally, it was a pretty good background. But generally speaking, it's very hard to just walk in there and say, this is my background, have me run. They say, hey, you need to pay your dues a little bit, you're kind of young, and we
need to know you.
We need to know you, exactly. So that's why they say, go work on this other person's campaign, and then see how you do there, and then maybe not next year, maybe the year after, they will give you your shot.
How often we have elections in the U.S.?
We have elections every year. The way it works is on the even number years, 2012, 2014, 2016, it's the federal offices and the state offices. I'm a New York State Senator, so I run in the even number years.
I just want to explain it more to the viewers. Federal means nationwide.
Nationwide, the president and the Congress. So the president runs every 4 years in an even number year. And the United States Congress the House of Representatives runs every 2 years, every 2 years in an even number of years. And the United States Senate is a little different. They run every 6 years in the even number of years. So that's the federal government in Washington. You have the President, the United States Senate, and the United States Congress, United States House of Representatives. On the state level, we have a similar thing. In New York, for example, we have a governor. And then we have a state senate where I serve, and a state assembly, which would be comparable to the United States House of Representatives. We all run in the even number years. And then on the odd number years, you have the county elections in the different states. And mind you, in the United States, like the large populations in Egypt, for example, the county where I live, Suffolk County on Long Island, actually has 1.4 million people. So it's a pretty big. It's bigger than a lot of states in the United States. So and bigger than a lot of countries, I guess. And then so they run in the even number years, and then the local town elections are also in the odd number years, I should say. For example, the town I live in, we have 320,000 people who live in just that one town. So it's big populations.
How did you see the process in terms of the governmental supervision and the way things are planned? Is there any planning process for the election?
Oh yeah. We actually have what they call boards of elections, which oversee the running of them, and they need to make sure that they're done fairly. It's actually the people that work there either belong to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It's an equal number of jobs, so you can't say that one party is running the elections to make it unfair, So if you have both sides watching each other, they will say, okay, well, you need to have this number of polling booths, for example, in a certain spot, and when you go to actually vote in the United States, they have poll watchers. They have a Republican sitting there and a Democrat sitting there to make sure that they double check the names and there's nobody, funny business about who's voting. So it's not to say there hasn't been some problems in terms of making it all clean and no scandal free. For the most part, in the United States has elections that are already pretty scandal free.
So part of the process of election is to ensure and assure the democracy of the process, and everybody gets the proper chance to run for the offices.
Correct.
And what I'm saying is, in Egypt now, it's very important because the Congress, the new Congress, is going to do the legislation, is going to draw the new laws. So it's very important for everybody to vote. Have you had any problem in your district, or if you want to talk in America in general, with the decreased amount of people voting, and did this affect directly or indirectly on the election process?
Yeah, we have had, generally speaking, when we have a presidential election, for example, there's a lot more people coming out to the vote. More people are interested in it, you know, there's bigger issues, and I mean, and it's a precipitous drop. It's a big drop when the president is not running. The year the president runs, we might get 60–70% of the people voting in this country, and then in a local election the next year, on the odd number year, maybe 15 or 20%, sometimes 25% if it's a lot, you know. So, and it really, and ironically, another big part of our elections is the local school board elections, you know, and that is in a separate, that happens every year, but it is at a separate time other than the normal November elections. The problem is, the people, when they go to elect their school board, for example, the taxes we pay here, that's like 70% of the taxes are decided by the school board, and you only have like 7–10% of the people coming out to vote, so it's a big thing, but they don't, in their mind, they're thinking about the president, they're only going to come out to vote in the president. So coming out to vote, particularly for Congress in a situation like the United States Congress and the upcoming election in Egypt, is vital in terms of getting out to vote, because you don't know, if you don't go out to vote, then the person that you don't want in there may be in there making the laws in a couple months, and you're going to regret it.
Yeah, and it's very important to be also in direct contact with the community and what's going on, because, you know, a lot of people think my vote is not going to count, one vote is not going to count, but the truth is every single vote counts. Without
a doubt, Doctor. And I can tell you, having been involved with campaigns for over 30 years, I've seen many races decided by 7 votes, 4 votes, you know, 40 votes, you know, so every vote does count, and even a couple that were decided by 1 vote.
Amazing.
It is amazing, and we're talking about elections that have tens of thousands of people voting for somebody, and the other person won by 1 vote, so it's huge.
Senator Boyle, for being a senator for 2 years and 16 years of New York State Assemblyman, what's your first priority nowadays?
Well, I was just recently appointed to made the chairman of the Commerce Committee in Economic Development. So as I move forward, creating jobs, we've had a tough recession here in the United States. We're starting to come out of it now. But creating jobs and lowering taxes to help our business community grow is important, because a lot of my constituents are still out of work, and I want to help them, you know, to maintain their homes and keep their families here. That's going to be a big thing going forward. The last session I was in the Senate, my big priority was combating the heroin epidemic that we're facing here in the United States, and in New York in particular. It is a worldwide problem, without a doubt.
It is a worldwide problem, and it hits all the youth and all the young men and women. But how is this affecting your district in particular?
We've had a large number of deaths, you know, and mostly what we had was young athletes, for example, in high school, they were being injured and they were given opioids by their doctor, overprescribed opioids, and then we passed legislation to crack down on the overprescribing of oxycodone, drugs like that. And so these children, these students, were still addicted to the opioids, so they turned right to heroin. And the heroin is very cheap now; it's very pure. You know, when I think of, you know, when I was younger, I think of a heroin addict as maybe someone in the inner city, and you know.
Yeah, that's what I think about.
Not anymore. All levels of socioeconomic, rich, poor, middle class, city, urban, suburban, you know, even rural parts of our state have large heroin problems, and it was costing lives left and right. We had a young lady in our office who lost her sister to a heroin overdose, and a lovely family. You just never know who has an addictive personality or chemically in their body to become addicted, because they say that 1 out of every 4 people, 24% of the people who try heroin one time get addicted to it, and that, it's huge. Yep.
That's a big. For sure, I would never try it at this level, because you know, 25% is a lot, or 24% is a lot.
You are the chairman of the Substance Abuse Committee, Alcohol and Drug Abuse. So I wanted to briefly ask you about the sudden death of Philip Seymour Hoffman. You know, as it relates to addiction, what type of psychological hold can a drug addiction have on a person?
Yeah, Julia, it's unbelievable, and we see it now with recent numbers coming out about heroin overdose fatalities on Long Island, throughout New York State, and really throughout the country. This is a drug, opiate and heroin, painkillers. It starts with painkillers, usually goes to heroin, that people go to rehab, try and get out, have a very difficult time. It is the strongest of addictions, and we lose everyday people in New York, young adults all the time, and even some of the most talented actors of our generation based on this terrible addiction. And you saw in the paper, Philip Seymour Hoffman tried to get help a number of times, but it was such a strong addiction, ultimately it took his life.
Do you see any challenges in particular in your district from foreign immigrants coming to Suffolk County, living there?
Yeah, I represent one community called Brentwood on Long Island, and that has a large influx of Central American individuals. Some of them documented, some undocumented. But the last couple of years, President Obama a few years ago made a comment to say, like, we'll welcome everyone, and a lot of people in Central America took that as send your kids there, you know. So we have had a very large influx of unaccompanied minors. These are young kids, 12 years old, 14 years old, and younger, coming by themselves without their parents. Maybe their father's already here, the mother's back home in where their country is, and riding the train and coming across the border. And now we have hundreds of them, in thousands.
So they have to allow them in. If
they have to allow them in, and now there's a decision that they're not going to send them back. And it has a huge impact because they have to go to school. By New York State, any student of that age has to go to school. They're not going to ask about immigration status. They're going to send them to school. So a lot of these children do not speak any English. So you need special teachers to teach them English as a second language. And it's going to be a very expensive proposition. We need to find them homes and shelter and schooling.
So taxes will go up, obviously.
And the taxes are already very high, and they're going to go up even further as a result of it.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So we're asking, my priority is to have our state government funded, and actually the federal government, because they were the ones that made the decision to let them in. So we should get federal funds to pay for these additional schooling costs, so our taxes don't go up. And to give you some idea, Doctor, that the property taxes where I live it's a normal size house. It's not a huge mansion, you know. I don't know, would be comparable in Egypt, but like $10,000, $12,000 for a small house
per year.
Yeah, per year.
Yes.
Yeah. That's just before you get to the mortgage or anything else, just the property taxes.
You know, only this year they started applying the estate taxes to the homes in Egypt, and people are complaining. Before that, everybody, all what you need is to buy a piece of land, build a house, you're fine, you're set for life. Yeah, no tax.
Not here, no way, no way.
So people are complaining that the government is charging them for taxes, even though it's not even 12,000. We're talking about maybe 1,700, 2,000 tops a year, but everybody's complaining that they're giving this money away to the government, and you know. I always explain to my viewers that this is nothing compared to what we pay over here.
That's right, and it's actually different in the United States too. Different states have much. I mean, I have friends that live in Texas and they have huge ranches and they pay $1,000 or $900 a year. You know, so but it just happens to be in our state, or with the infrastructure and our education costs, it's very, very high.
Over the years, Senator Boyle, you had a lot of work done in your district. I would like, before we go out in a break, I would like you to talk briefly on the workforce, the career fairs that you have put together.
Yeah, well, we do career fairs, you know, because of the recession. A lot of people, as I said, were out of work, and so we bring we'll call 50 to 75 employers, sometimes big employers and medium-sized employers, to have in a big convention center, and offer all our constituents the opportunity to go and give their resumes and interview really for a job there. And we've had quite a bit of success finding positions for people who were out of work, had a good job, maybe lost it early on a couple of years ago, and then to find them a position. And not only that, but at these career fairs, we also have resume writing workshops and tell you how to do an interview. So for people that may not be used to it, haven't done it in several years.
This is very interesting. I would like to talk more about it and elaborate more about it right after the break. We'll see you after the break. So, Senator Boyle, thank you for your insight about the work force and the career fairs. It's a very important topic because we have a high percentage of unemployment in Egypt. And actually, we had the New York State and U.S. in general for the last few years. It was a big problem.
Absolutely.
Big issue with unemployment. A lot of people lost their jobs. The wages were not really good. A lot of people lost their health insurance and all of that. So as a senator, I mean, I appreciate to be in a district where a senator really cares to bring employers and employees together to meet at a convention or a center where employers get, instead of just going through resumes, see people face to face, which makes a big difference. Sure. So when did you start doing that exactly?
We started doing it a couple years ago when I was first elected, and I have a wonderful staff in my office, and they coordinated the whole thing. And we had 600 people come the first time.
600 people looking for jobs. How many employers?
We had 75. Yep, the first time, and then about the same this past year too. And we're going to do it again. We're going to, even though, as I said, the economy is starting to turn around, the unemployment situation is getting better, the numbers are getting lower. We still want to make sure that everyone who needs a job or is when I say there's some people unemployed, but some underemployed. Mind you, these people, some of these people maybe worked on Wall Street and made a significant amount of money until we had the crash in 2008. And so now they have a job, but they're not making anywhere near what they were, or maybe working part-time or consulting, So we're trying to get those people, not to say they're going to ever get back to where they were at the high level, but at least stop them from being underemployed. So these interviews, they may have some experience as a businessman or someone who worked in the private sector, to go meet another company that say, hey, we could use your skills and we'll pay you more money, so come our way.
How successful this has been?
Extremely successful. Yeah, we've had a number of people contact us to say, thank you very much. I hooked up with this law firm or whatever the business is, and now I found the job, and it's very rewarding as an elected official and my staff to say, wow, we actually made the connection there. And we've talked to a lot of my other colleagues in the state legislature and in Congress to do similar things. The more we have government involvement with trying to do a hands-on approach of getting these people jobs, the better.
Do you think, just throwing it out there, do you think should we get those people that got jobs to volunteer to help others in the next one?
I think that's a great idea. That's right. We'll definitely talk about that.
Yeah, because it's it's a life testimony. They've been through it, and I'm sure as much as you help them so much, they would like to help others.
I completely agree. And then a lot of them we taught them how to do their resumes. We taught them how to go through interview skills. We had people come in to both of our career fairs that had never really gone on an interview before. They might have just got a job out of high school and something like that, and they're like middle-aged and never put a suit on and walked into an interview before, and they really appreciated the tips that our experts gave them.
It's great. Yeah. How do you picture the economy in the next few years?
It's getting better. There's no question about it. The problem is it's going to be a different set of scenarios with our economy. I don't think we're going to, because the world is becoming flatter in terms of the economic ability. You have other countries that are taking manufacturing jobs and stuff like that. We have to realize that America's strength is more in technology and advancement that way. It's going to be a good economy, but a different economy, I believe. And that's one of the things I want to focus on as a chairman of the Senate Committee on Commerce and Economic Development and Small Business. Because, for example, we have technologies, viewers probably don't know, but like Uber, perhaps, there's,
it's a phone number you call, you get a cab, anywhere you are, do it on the phone.
And
it's amazing.
It's amazing technology. It is.
It's revolutionary.
It is, and it's all around the world. I mean, obviously, it's not just in New York, but I mean, I was in a cab last month, and the cab driver who had owned his own business, does very well, said, I realize that the technology is going to change this business, and probably in 10 years, there's going to be no cabs. It's going to be all Uber-type cars. Maybe not that company, but that idea. Because of the technology. The same thing with the Airbnb. We have an online company, and I don't mean to do a commercial, but like some technology where people can go online and then use someone's house. If they want to come to New York, instead of going to a hotel, they're going to be staying at someone's house who may be on vacation. They swap. Exactly. Yep. And I think that more and more of that technology is going to come down the pike.
Convenience.
Convenience and cheaper, a lot cheaper. Yep. And even now, I saw an article recently about there's a hardware store in California which has robots that go up and down the aisle. And right now, obviously, you go into a drugstore and you say, well, where do I find this? And the person will go and walk you there. Well, now the robot will go and walk you there. Oh, that's on aisle 4. And
yeah,
we'll bring
I saw
you
that in UAE and
oh yeah, they have that
hotels. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, where's the bathroom? It takes you to the bathroom.
That's the way of the future.
Yes, I think
they don't have to pay benefits or anything like that. They're working all the time.
I think in the next 10 years, a lot of things are going to be changing with the amount of technology. I mean, to be honest, you know, when Google Earth came out, and I'm like, if I have this and I can access Google Earth, what the government can do.
Oh, no question. You're absolutely right. You imagine what they can do on a security level.
Yes.
And even things like, you know, just GPS in the car. You know, I remember when I first started in the legislature, there was no such thing. I actually had taken a trip to the North Pole at an Arctic survival school, and we were there with some special forces guys, and it was the first time they ever well, we have this thing, and they can tell us anywhere on Earth that you are. Really? And now every kid in high school has one, you know? It was an amazing technology then, but now it's like commonplace.
I know, it's amazing. What are the crime rates in your districts and in New York in general?
We have actually had good success in lowering the crime rates in New York City, for example, and my suburban district out on Long Island. The numbers have come down. How
did you do it? This is the leading question.
Yeah, and
this is what I wanted to know. I know it was high, now it went down. But what did you do? You must have done something about it.
I think the idea was started in New York City about 20 years ago under Mayor Giuliani at the time, was the broken windows theory, they call it. You know, for years there would be people, they called them squeegee men, out on the sidewalk, and they'd go and they'd clean your car window even if you didn't want it, you know, or they'd, you know, do minor crimes. And the police officers were like, I'm not wasting my time on that, I'm going after the bigger things. But this mindset of the broken windows to say that even a small crime like a broken window, someone throwing a rock, arrest them and make them charge them with this crime. That way people will learn, like,
avoid the bigger ones.
Avoid the bigger ones, because the people who start out small, if you leave them alone, they're going to end up going to the bigger crimes.
Correct.
And so that has really helped tremendously in lowering the amount of crime. What we have, though, as I got back to the heroin epidemic, that's had an uptick because of the people addicted to drugs. There's no question about it. People that, you know, who typically wouldn't rob somebody or go into a house and rob some jewelry, because they're so desperate for the need to get drugs, heroin most importantly, they will commit a crime that they normally wouldn't do.
Is abusing drugs like heroin and other drugs as a crime itself, or buying and selling it in New York State?
A possession of it is a crime.
Possession of it.
Just having it is a crime. It's not as serious, obviously, as selling it. That gets more, so the criminal penalties go up higher as a result of that. But we're trying to, and I have been in my capacity as the chairman of the heroin task force, to say we're going to understand that this is really a disease, and we're going to punish the individual, but not make them, you know, go to jail for a very long time. We're going to get them the help they need. They say, you're an addict. We can give you the help you need to get off the drugs, and then you have to have then you can have a productive life. But if you're committing crimes, whether it's because of the drug use or not, you still got to pay the price.
What comes to your mind when you hear the word Middle East?
Turmoil.
The first thing that comes to your mind.
Turmoil is the first one, but and also hope. I'm always hopeful that the tragedies that have occurred and the violence that has occurred in the Middle East.
So terrorism. You just don't want to say the word.
No, there's no question about it, and but it's on all sides, you know. And terrorism. We just had an attack today, and there's one last week, and there'll be another one next week, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And our concern about the new terrorist threat of ISIS or ISIL is of grave concern to anybody who's an elected official, particularly in a place like New York, because we saw what happened in Paris, and it can happen anywhere, and including here in the United States.
I was about to ask you this. A lot of people think, ISIL or ISIS or any of these terrorist groups, they self-contained and they're only contained in one place, and us Americans live here, or Egyptians or people from Europe will never get affected. Is that a true statement?
Not at all. They can and will hit anywhere, and what they try and do, obviously, is they try and get people on the internet to make them want to do something like that, a lone wolf, they would say, like the situation in Paris. I mean, these are not guys that were born and raised over in the Middle East, but they were recruited, if you will, you know, I mean, and
then they planted the ideology into
absolutely, and that can always happen here. We've had since September 11th attacks, we've had 19 terrorist attacks that were thwarted by law enforcement here in New York, and we've had over 70 attacks that have taken place in the United States since 2001. You never know what's going to happen, and we've had, you think about some pretty big, Boston bombing of the marathon. So it's always a possibility. It's always a concern. I commend Governor Cuomo here in New York for taking steps to try and protect against that, increasing funding, and Doctor, you've probably seen the same thing getting on the train. There's no question that the police and law enforcement are out in force on the public ways. I mean, I go on the train now and I say, wow, there's a lot more police presence than I remember. Yep. So they're taking it seriously, and we've even in New York now created a college just to study this, Homeland Security, and it's going to be the State University of New York, which will focus on emergency preparedness, Homeland Security, and cybersecurity. So it's going to be the first college in the country, in our entire country, that will focus on these issues, give a degree in these issues, and it's unfortunately it's actually going to become a profession, a growing field. So,
yes.
Yeah.
I think that terrorism has pushed us in that direction, which cost a lot of money and a lot of energy and a lot of strategy to try to learn. And every time we come up with something, they come up with a different thing, and we try to cope with their strategies. My question is, on a local level in your district and on a bigger level in New York and a bigger in the U.S., what do you think should be done besides what the governor has done to protect us from those attacks?
I think that on a national level, we're going to have to, as you would say, take the fight to them. I certainly support that military engagement in some of these.
I think we're very delayed.
Yeah, I mean, we should have been there already. I know that President Obama has done some drone strikes in certain countries, you know, and but I think to really take out the terrorists, we need to have boots on the ground, and I would prefer to see at least American military intelligence leading the charge. I mean, I hate to see American soldiers go in harm's way, and I don't want anybody to risk themselves, but the threat is real, because we see on these videos from ISIS what they're capable of doing, and they're very sick individuals, and so
they have no heart whatsoever.
And you know, and there's nothing stopping them. And they have taken over a large swath of land and control things. I see that the other countries are winning some back, you know, in certain areas, but not enough. And so I would like to see the American military force used to a greater extent to take them on seriously.
I think at this point I think the whole world has to unite somehow.
No question.
Because this is a global threat.
Yeah.
You know, if we leave them doing what they're doing, we never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And you know, look at the first President Bush, who when Kuwait was invaded, he got an international team together, you know, I mean, a coalition of countries willing to put men and women and resources and military might to knock back Saddam Hussein. That's the type of thing we need right now, and I'm surprised that it hasn't happened. I know there's a lot of different countries that are cutting deals, and you know,
a lot of people turning their face the other way,
and it's scary because we can't afford that now. Because if these people are able to succeed to take more land, and you see what they do in these areas, and you know, they have the one area where they killed 13 students because they were watching a soccer game.
Yeah,
you know?
it's unbelievable,
and making people jump off things, and obviously the beheadings are ubiquitous there now. So we need to me, it reminds me of the early days of the Nazis. And if they would have taken out them early on, they would have avoided a tremendous World War II, you know. So and we need to do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, talking about World War, do you feel that there's one coming up?
I'm hopeful that it won't, that it doesn't get to that.
Not against terrorism or ISIS, but somehow I feel like certain countries are, siding by each other. There's like a couple of teams are forming.
Yeah.
You think this is a sign?
My bigger concern is not so much a global world war, but the lone wolf terrorist.
So this is the biggest threat.
Yeah,
right?
and you look about you have ISIS, for example, using extortion and kidnapping to raise money. They're raising a lot of money besides selling oil, but they wanted $200 million, for example, for the Japanese prisoners.
Selling women.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I feel like we're in the century one.
Oh my God!
First century.
And so, if they are able to accumulate millions of dollars, tens of millions, which they may be able to do, then maybe they can buy some radioactive material, and God forbid, God knows what happens then.
And these guys don't care.
They do not care.
They just bomb themselves. They bomb others. They don't.
I went down to Ground Zero after like 3 days after 9/11. And saw the pit, as they called it, the big pile of rubble. And it struck me for the first time. And I know when I grew up, we had the Soviet Union, the United States, with what they called mutually assured destruction. Both countries had a lot of nuclear weapons, and we knew that if we launched on them, they'd launch on us, and the whole thing would be over. So no one ever did anything. But as I stood there on the top of that pile with all the tragedy around it, I realized these people are so sick that if they got a nuclear bomb, they would use it.
Yeah, they would have used it easily, without a doubt.
Yep.
How can we stop this funding? How can
it's tough to do with the amount of technology they have and the way they do a lot of thievery, I'm sure, on the internet and stuff like that. But it really comes down to us outsmarting them in terms of cutting off their pipelines of money.
Resources.
Yep. And that includes some wealthy individuals, perhaps in the Middle East and other parts of the world, that may be saying, I'll give them money and they'll leave me alone. We can't have that. It's been going on. There's no question about it.
This is a big question because, our government here has been accused on multiple occasions that they either supporting those groups, and I hate to say it because this is a strong statement, or just trying to tell them, I'll let you go, do whatever you have to do as long as you're away from me.
Yep.
Or keep your friends close, enemy closer, but, with a distance at this level.
Right.
What do you say to the Egyptian viewers about our position in this matter as an American government?
I think it's vitally important that the Egyptian population stand up to these terrorists. It's a wonderful country, and it's been an ally of the United States. And they, you have bad actors in your country just like we have bad actors in our country. And you need to stand up to them now, because we will be there to support you. But the bottom line is the fight has to be done back in the homeland, back in Egypt.
More questions to Senator Boyle when we come back after the break. Thank you. Welcome back with Senator Boyle. Very interesting topics and questions, and we thank him for his time. Senator Boyle, I wanted to talk more about Egypt. Have you ever been to Egypt?
I have.
Have you?
I was in Cairo.
Years
ago, in my younger days. I did a lot of traveling. I loved it. Yeah, it was fascinating.
What is Egypt to an individual American, a normal person that walks in the street, that goes to work, goes to school, go back home, not involved in politics, not involved in administration? What is Egypt to them?
I think the average American who's not involved with politics, stuff like that, they think of Egypt as a ally of the United States, but one that has had turmoil in the last several years, and obviously the original protests and overthrowing of a longtime president there. And I think that they're aware of that, but then I think they see that again, the average American is saying, well, okay, I know they got rid of they may not know President Mubarak's name, but they know, they know what happened. But then they think, okay, well, then the guy that went in there, then he got overthrown,
So there must be something wrong with the people, right? That's what they thought?
And I think that the Arab Spring, as they talked about, and not just in Egypt, but other countries, but they think of Egypt primarily, to say, well, okay, maybe they chose the wrong person there, and what's going on now? And one thing that I know that they're very concerned about is the fact that they do not want terrorists or extremists to take over the top, the government.
Yes.
That's the very concern about
what do you think personally, from your own perspective, about the ouster of President Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood president?
Yeah.
Was that a good step in for the Egyptian revolution and the Egyptian people, or?
Well, I mean, there's a couple
because
ways.
we're paying the price now. You know,
Yeah,
all these terrorist attacks is, you know, they want to bring them back.
Yeah, and I think that Americans view Morsi as being a little extreme in his positions. We were hoping, and we hope in a lot of these different countries, to say you want a moderate in there, for example, and whether it's Iran or any other Middle Eastern country, you say, okay, well, the president who got there, we're hoping that they are an ally of the United States, obviously, and perhaps a little more moderate and more inclusive in their government. The Egyptian people obviously did not feel that Mr. Morsi was that way, and now with the new government, that there's terrorist attacks are as a result of that. I don't think the average American understands that part of it.
They don't understand it.
You know,
Is it because the media? Is it because the media doesn't feed the Americans of the truth or what's going on in the Middle East?
I think the average American person is kind of like
they only care about here.
They're looking at their own family, their own lives, and paying the bills and stuff like that.
Paying the mortgage and the car payments and all
sending
that.
the kids to school. What they get in that is more dribs and drabs of information, and they have a general idea, but I don't think they understand the intimate details of what happened there. Yeah.
Is it important for them, from your own perspective, to know?
Absolutely. I think
because one way or another they get affected with it, right?
No question about it. And I've always been the type, as I said, growing up, I was always interested in these things, so I read the New York Times and all the newspapers about what's going on over the course of many years, to watch what, you know, different leaders and what happened to them, and see the reasons behind it. But for the average American, I don't think they get that into it. But they are concerned. As I say, the biggest concern for them is they want somebody there who is an ally of the United States, is not going to send out terrorists to do something bad here and all over the world. They don't want bad things happening there either. But they would prefer a more moderate person in charge than an extremist like they do and see in some countries.
It was said a couple of times last week that a lot of terrorists have been released from Guantanamo Bay, and these are the people that started ISIS. And,
exactly.
And why we keep releasing them?
Yeah,
Is
I mean,
it like we're planning.
One of the problems was, I know when President Obama was first elected, he said, "I'm going to close Guantanamo." Okay, well, it took him numerous years. He still hasn't done it yet. But they need to be very careful about the people that they had there that long, and even I think, honestly, from an American perspective, and the average American is thinking, well, you know, these people are terrorists, so we need to keep them in confinement. However, then you hear the stories about, well, this person has been sitting there for 7, 8, 10 years with no trial, no chance to prove himself. They won't even give him the evidence that they're using against him. So the average sense of Americans, like, well, that's not fair either. Someone who's brought to trial, you need to say, what are you charged with? And then I can defend myself. No, I wasn't there. I was not even in the country at the time or something. You know, it's difficult for the American public, but they do hate. You're absolutely right, Doctor, when they say, well, this guy was released from Guantanamo and now he was involved with the terrorist act.
And we see we see their pictures and you know, in different gowns and
scary.
It's very scary. I think everybody, you know, the whole world we have to put our foot down against this terrorism. Going back to your local district, what's the public opinion about the killing of the police officers and all this drama and all the craziness that going on between blacks and whites? And
it's a big issue here in the United States. You know, it started with a situation in Missouri where a young man was shot by a police officer, and you can argue both sides about what happened, but the fact was that when the grand jury went there, they heard the testimony and they didn't charge the police officer with anything. As a result of that, there's been a growing resentment in certain communities of the United States that police officers maybe not be there to protect them, but harass them more so. We have a thing here in New York, what was a policy called stop and frisk, which got back to the whole broken windows theory I was talking about, where if they had someone, they would frisk them and say, okay, you have a weapon or something like that. The police officers were trying to protect these neighborhoods from some gun violence, but at the same time, individuals, in the minority community were feeling like the police officers were harassing them. Why are you doing this to me? Let me walk down the street in peace, So it got to a point where we had a tragedy a couple months ago where 2 police officers here in New York were killed, and everyone's trying to take a breath. Just say, okay, calm down, stop the protests against the police. The police office they'll try and be more sensitive to the needs of the community and making sure they don't feel like they're being harassed. So that's the state we're in right now.
Well, I think regardless of the feeling, obviously when there's a lot of police officers in the street that I walk in or I live in or I work in, it's not very pleasant. But in the same time, the more that I see him, I feel more secure because they eventually protect me and protect my family and my kids. So I think we have to find some sort of balance here because I think as much as I could understand people that accusing the police for hate crimes and this and that, they also have to understand that these police officers have put their life on the line to protect us.
Right. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think that I represented a lot of the police officers who work as police officers in New York City, and they commute out to the district where I live on Long Island, and I do not believe that any police officer goes to work saying, I want to kill someone today.
You want to kill somebody today? It's impossible.
Sometimes it's literally a split-second decision. We're in life and death. And I think that generally speaking, they have the best interest in heart and doing this for the right reasons. Unfortunately, tragedies do occur, and I think that there are certain agitators in our community, in our country, that will kind of thrive on this, like, start a rally and stuff like that. And that just causes more resentment.
But meanwhile, when their homes are robbed, they're like, where's the police? How come the police didn't show up on time?
Yeah, and I think a big movie out there now is Selma, talking about Dr. Martin Luther King and his efforts at nonviolent protest. You want to have a problem with the police officer or anything like that? Go and protest, absolutely. You have that right in this country, no question about it. But when those protests turn violent, that's the problem. We're seeing too much of that here right now.
I want to talk about being different and accepting and respecting and understanding each other. It was, ever since Martin Luther King time, and this whole, racism thing has been dissolving. And then all of a sudden we see things coming up on on the top of the sea again. And is it the intolerance? People are not tolerating each other anymore, or do you think there's political things behind it?
There's certain political things behind it, but I think that we also see it with anti-Semitism on the rise in Europe, and to a certain extent here in the United States, not as much. I think we do need to be more inclusive and more understanding and more tolerant. We're pretty fortunate here in New York to be more tolerant, and we have more
because
liberal, it's a melting pot. You know.
Well, I love it. That's why I love it.
Without a doubt, it's a great state, a great place to be. Maybe certain parts of our country are not that way. They're more homogenous, in which they may have different feelings. I'm sure part of it, and I think that they say, well, people are racist against maybe President Obama or something like that. There's always going to be some racism someplace, but I think overwhelmingly, remember, he won presidency with overwhelming numbers, so it can't be that bad, generally speaking, in the United States.
Exactly.
I see trees of green, red roses too, I see them bloom for me and for you.
Thank you for what you do on a daily basis in our community, your leadership and your courage. And whether you're retired, whether you're in the middle of your career, whether you're just starting out your career, thank you for what you do every day for our communities.
Well, I'm using this because I want to come to the point that a lot of Muslims, and I have a lot of good Muslim friends that are very conservative, and they don't like to fight, and they don't like to have any problems, and they want to live in peace and let others live in peace. But a lot of others are accusing the world of discriminating against Islam, and I just want to make sure that they know that this is not a discrimination against Islam. It's a discrimination against those terroristic groups and terrorist attacks. What's your take on that?
Without a doubt, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I know since I've been in the Senate, I've visited my local mosque many times, and they talk about tolerance.
There's a mosque in Suffolk County, right?
Exactly, and big.
It's 1,000
people on a Friday.
1,000 people there?
Yeah. And and we make that case all the time. It's not anti-Muslim or anti-Islam. It's Islamic fanaticism and extremism and they are very good about being vocal against these terrorist attacks. And I think part of the United States, we're a little resentful, perhaps, of when after 9/11, when they saw some people in the Muslim faith not really criticizing what happened, you know.
Yeah.
However, the Parisian terrorist attack, which really happened, they were out there in front, and people really appreciated that. I think the Americans want to see. We know it's not you. We know it's not the average person.
Especially America had opened their doors to a lot of Muslims.
Yeah.
We see mosques bigger than the ones are in Saudi Arabia sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah,
you know?
no question, no question. And so the imams of these mosques need to criticize and speak down. You don't want any people who are stirring the flames, if you will, to create problems here or anywhere else.
Talking about the land of the free speech, is it okay to criticize other religions, like what happened in Charlie Hebdo? What do you think? I mean,
I personally do think you should be allowed to do that. I think that, you know, any violence as a result of freedom of speech, it may not be right. I know the Pope said that they shouldn't do it, but as an American who you know think that should not,
I think they should not touch in religion. Personally, I don't know, but you know, you might disagree with me. I think, you know, if there's something holy, we should not touch on it. But if they did, you know, they don't deserve to be killed. You know,
that's
like
just
sue them or just,
exactly.
You know,
that's right.
Just
that's right.
You know, just explain your frustration, or you know, draw something on return, or send them letters, or send them, you know.
And in our country, you have a right to do that, obviously, but people do not want to be politically incorrect or whatever to offend anybody. But you're absolutely. The bottom line is, no one should die as a result of doing something like that, of drawing a cartoon or something.
What do you see for the future of Egypt?
I'm hopeful for good things. I know that they need to, as a country, continue to be moderate and be an American ally, and don't let the extremists grab too big a foothold there. And as long as they're doing that, they will have a strong ally in the United States.
Senator Phil Boyle, thank you very much for being in my show, and very pleased to hear your perspectives on different topics.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you.